Welcome to another edition of the Civ Battle Royale audio narration. My name is Dawkinzz, and let's get right into it. Welcome to part 48 of the Civ Battle Royale MK2. I'm your host, Muffin King 15, better known as Ryan James on Steam, longtime Civ modder, first-time commenter, and probably a Manx nationalist. Here's a quick recap. Last time we saw the last of the Maori holdings crushed by pirates, as well as the spread of Boer peacekeepers to every corner of Earth. A worrying development that may indeed foreshadow bloodshed to come. I can guarantee you a significant number of city flips and pointless DOWs will occur this round, and this wonderful bit of art was done by Dryreen. I wonder how aware Sweden is of Finnish giant that slumbers over the mountains. Another wonderful map by Laxaraxariskel and Malistrasa depicting a world constantly trapped in never-ending warfare, and the year 4000 BC. This diplomatic chart was made by Mazer Laser. Not really sure why they bothered to add a legend key for friendships or denunciations. Everyone's at war. Looks like everyone is bullying the little Mughal statelet. Poor Akbar. And here we have a lovely power ranking slide by TA Knight. The Inuit get more frightening by the turn as they switch to more controversial nuclear tactics. Whether their power will be surpassed by a civ like the Boers remains to be told. Looks like I spoke too soon, as the Maori have captured Laredo from Henry Morgan of the Buccaneers. However long this rump state lasts is anyone's guess, though. Henry has bigger fish to fry as Inuit units gradually make their way down to Florida. Also note the long Icelandic carrier hanging out next to the Yucatan Peninsula. Sorry, Yakutian Peninsula has been in the slides a lot lately. I wonder what it is carrying. Speaking of, Ekanek of the Inuits, Kamchatka holdings look to be in a dire position as an impressive if disorganized Yakutian force looks set to sweep across the capture Isit, Wachulum, Igloolik, and more. However, the Inuit have one trick up their sleeve, another atomic bomb. The next few turns shall indeed be painted blue with the blood of Inuits and Yakuts. Nuclear warfare has ravaged the already hostile region of this world. Not only do the people here have to avoid the natural predators like wolves and white walkers, but now they must evade nuclear bears and fish with legs. It looks as though Sitting Bull of the Sioux has wasted no time in getting workers to rebuild the iconic Sioux teepee. Though I have to say I'm very confused as to how that Blackfoot worker got into the Sioux capital of Mede-Wankentawan. Make the Sioux great again is the slogan that plasters the walls of the city. Why are we building a wall? To keep the Blackfoot out. And who's gonna pay for it? The Blackfoot. In other news, a line of Mexican artists appear to be protesting on the Inuit-Mexican border, probably complaining about the damage the Inuit industrial complexes are doing to the environment. Political jokes aside, let's look at a civ we haven't seen in a while, Canada. Lester B. Pearson seems to be gradually building up an army. The Canadians may be crippled to some degree, but they could make a comeback. The real hurdle for the Canadians, if they want to be a world power again, is that they are boxed in by a much stronger Icelandic and Inuit empire, and to expand, they'd have to declare war on either. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place. A tiny buccaneer contingent sails around Maori waters, probably looking for rum. Poor Te Raparara of the Maori. Almost anywhere else in the world and they would have been considered a superpower. But they made the mistake of invoking the rage of the now nuclear God Emperor Parks by existing too close to Australian territory. Who thinks they'll be wiped out this part? The betting starts at $10. The recently declared Brazilian-Chilean War rages on, with Brazil besieging the former Argentine city of Buenos Aires, one of those important capital cities. While the city of La Plata looks to be in serious danger, I can't honestly see Chile holding it permanently. They simpledo not have the manpower. This war may condemn Chile to a life as a rump state. While in the past they've been able to use the mountainous terrain to their advantage, the rise of paratroopers and helicopter gunships should put a stop to that. Only their artillery can save them now. Reports from Secret Agent M confirm that Sejong of Korea is plotting against Genghis Khan of Mongolia. Now that's all well and good, Sejong, but why aren't you plotting against Vietnam? Every turn, the Trunk Sisters get stronger, and Sejong just sits there cradling nukes in his arms as if they were newborns. That's a pretty sight. In all seriousness, though, a Mongol-Korean war could prove to be very interesting. While Korea obviously has a tech advantage, the Mongols have an increasingly scary-looking carpet. Very spoopy. Did Genghis upgrade his troops since I last looked? Sejong may bite off more than he can chew if he declares war. Also note that the Yakutian infantry, skiving off duty at the bottom of the screen, shouldn't you be fighting a war somewhere? Speaking of expanding Vietnamese power, the Trung seemed poised to conquer what remains of the Cham. This appears to be confirmed by Agent Semiramis, who has discovered a plot against Che Bang Nha of Champa. Just like in real life, Vietnam has been bullying the Cham for centuries. Or maybe Battle Royale has leaked into real life. Food for thought, people. Ouch! It appears Afghanistan has been embargoed by the World Congress. Though I have no idea how important trade was to the Afghan economy, the fact that the Afghan UI, the Kali, yields gold should help mitigate the damage. Not that it matters, Afghanistan is barely a regional power, and the sudden Finnish presence in the area should be a bigger cause for concern. I also sense that the Finns are preparing an assault on the Mughal city-state of Gyantsé. Also, am I the only one who finds it amusing that dev civs such as Rome and the Shanty are still given World Congress delegates? Damn, son! That flying carpet, though. If I recall correctly, the Finland was pretty low down on the initial power rankings. It was predicted that they'd be wiped out by a greater power like the Soviets or Polska. How wrong they were. Instead, Kekkonen of Finland has forged an impressive empire with holdings all around the world. In the grand city of Helsinki, propaganda dedicated to glorifying Kekkonen adorns towering skyscrapers. Finland, 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 the country I want to be pony trekking or camping, is blasted by loudspeakers from every street corner. I have no idea what that means. Gustavus of Sweden better finish upgrading his army. Already I see more advanced vessels in Swedish waters, along with a few infantry, but it'll take a lot more than that to fend off the giant that we know as Finland. Also of note, the world ideology is now autocracy. This doesn't mean much in terms of military development, but it may encourage a few civs to reconsider their ideology. Arabia has constructed the Manhattan Project. What an interesting development that is. With nuclear weaponry added to its arsenal, Arabia could really make some gains against its much weaker neighbors. While Arabia ain't no Finland, it is interesting to observe how these regional powers grow in strength. Meanwhile, in Siberia, a Boer peacekeeping force, heads north to investigate the Yakat-Sibir stalemate. A lone Sri Lankan vessel observes the recently renewed conflict between Chile and Brazil. Chile appears to be holding rather well, Buenos Aires has not fallen yet, and La Plata looks to be in an increasingly precarious position. A small but significant group of Chilean units patrol the waters around La Plata, and the Brazilian presence in the region is looking a little thin. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Portugal's pretty weak, but you're not going to do much damage with a couple of privateers, Ahmed of Morocco. France looks like it's growing in power, not that it will ever be a regional power, it's too technologically backwards, but at the very least, civs like Iceland or Sweden may have a tough time conquering it. It appears that Korea has made peace with the Mughals, like that war was ever relevant. Gustavus of Sweden appears to have thrown down the gauntlet at Tiridates of Armenia. This would be much more exciting and relevant if there wasn't a Spartan in the way, or a Swedish military presence anywhere near Armenia. Korea also wants to join in on the fun, declaring war against Armenia too, and it appears that the crippled rump state of the Mughals has made peace with the crippled rump state of the Maori. One less enemy for both of them, I guess. What did I say, Sejong? What did I say? Trung of Vietnam power looks to have been completely recovered from its earlier stumbles, signified by the Vietnamese advancement into the information era. We may be seeing industrial complexes soon, people. The considerable amount of paratroopers also implies that Vietnam may seek to conquer from afar. Perhaps they will finally be able to capture Lhasa of Tibet. Meanwhile, Finland is set to eliminate the Mughals for good. Here we see Hawaii's still painfully outdated navy. Kamehamehas of Hawaii's days will be numbered once the Wabagan attack. How many vessels from different civs can you spot? I can see 8, including a lone Blackfoot admiral who is probably seeking to conquer Hawaii all by his lonesome. As expected, La Plata has fallen, but I expect it to flip back a few more times. Chile has held up well so far, but it looks as though Brazil is ready for a new offensive. A lone Canadian scout lies stranded on the front lines, desperately dodging artillery fire as Brazilian helicopters zoom overhead. An Ethiopian musician plays an uplifting marching song, giving regiments of Great War infantry the morale they need to penetrate Carthaginian territory. The only thing standing in the way of Ethiopia and much of Hannibal of Carthage's holdings is a thin line of cannons and riflemen. I can't see them lasting much longer unless Selassie decides to accept a peace treaty halfway through its high tide. But even then, none of that will matter the moment the Boers attack. No matter how strong the Ethiopian Empire grows, the Boers will easily match it. Get ready to press F to pay your respects. The mighty Maori Empire has been more or less permanently wiped from the game. With no siege units, I can see no way for the city to flip again. Henry Morgan of the Buccaneers founds the city of Maracaibo on the Yucatan Peninsula, which shall surely grow to become a hive of scum and villainy, as you'd expect from a city of pirates. A good view of the Sibir core. Kumcha Khan of Sibir has clearly made an effort to build up the armed forces again, which will hopefully deter the Finnish threat. Also, for the moment, I thought the city of Sintra was called Sinatra. Holy snap! I spoke too soon. The Maori truly have a strong fighting spirit, as you'd expect, and with no real way to do damage to Laredo of the Maori, it'll be at least a couple of turns before the Bucks capture it again. Note the Canadians throwing themselves towards the Texan border seemingly arbitrarily. Wait, are they still at war with the Texans? And it looks like the Sibir Khanate has entered the information era. This is a promising sign as the Khanate joins the ranks of super civs like the Inuit. Kumcha, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. The Trung sisters of Vietnam are plotting against Stalin of the Soviets. I'd say this didn't mean anything, but then again the Trunks have a decent carpet of paratroopers. It mightn't be too hard for them to pull a Finland and slaughter Stalin's army of workers. The Arctic War rages on as Kumcha Khan of Sibir inflicts large damage on the city of Amga of Yakutia, despite only having a helicopter gunship in the area. The city of Beryozovo, much at the dismay of the Boer peacekeepers, seems ready to fall. If only the Yakuts could actually move a melee unit close enough without it being bombarded by enemy artillery fire. The Finnish Globetrotters continue to besiege Gyanse of the Mughals, though the lack of the siege units must be making life pretty difficult. When Gyanse falls, it looks like the Great Mughal dynasty will be condemned to live inside a submarine, just like a certain Babylonian god king. I'm sure there's some irony in here somewhere, but I can't find it. Okay, I'm pretty certain the Maori have fallen for good this time. About 85% sure, though I honestly did not see that coming. Since when were the Maori and Mexico at war? Truly, the Maori have fought hard in this game. Over the centuries, they quietly established a vast Pacific empire with well-populated cities. Even when the Wabagang came, the Maori were at the very least able to inflict devastating damage on the Aussie capital, an event that would forever change the world of Battle Royale, as the game went nuclear. F. Here we see the Inuit holdings are surprisingly sparse. Maybe the war machine has slowed down. Not that it matters too much, I doubt Canada could do much to dent them in the event of war. It also looks like the Inuit have wasted no time in converting the former Canadian and Texan territories for military use, constructing industrial complexes and communication centers left, right, and center. Hey, what's that on the right of the slide? Is that a Mexican composite bowman? Oh, poor thing. Must be lost. The Chilean defensive front appears to have collapsed as the Brazilians seize Buenos Aires and La Plata of Chile, as well as the city of La Rioja, which is especially important due to its large reserves of aluminum and silver. La Serena also looks poised to fall, but the Chileans still have an army left. They could make a surprising comeback. Pirates versus Mali. This should be an interesting war, especially considering the lack of action in West Africa. One may be inclined to believe that Malians are doomed, but considering the Inuit Buccaneer War, Henry Morgan's forces will be stretched pretty thin at this point. The lack of any navy whatsoever could spell doom for Mali, but at least they have a few modern infantry units. I mean, I'm sure it won't go too badly for Mali, right? Right, guys? Mansa Musa of Mali will make it out alive, won't he? But damn, son, that is a scary navy. That'll teach me to underestimate the Bucks. I predict many, many city flips along the West African coast to come. The Kamchatka War grinds to a halt as both armies remain too battered and thin to do any damage against each other. It looks as though the former Inuit city of Talioak has been captured by the Yakushans, but whether they'll hold it is anyone's guess. The former Incan city of Tiwanaku has fallen to Brazil, cutting the Chilean Empire in two. The Chileans do appear to have a small but determined-looking fleet ready to recapture the city. The same can't be said for La Serena, which looks ready to fall. The Mexican hold on Laredo looks to be permanent while the city of Gonzales falls into Henry Morgan's grasp. The city is likely to flip again as Ekenig of the Inuit has finally decided to commit to placing an army in the region. On the Sioux reservation of Medewankantawan, a billionaire tycoon named Sitting Bull is elected leader, building a citadel wall on the Mexican border and forcing Blackfoot workers out of the nation. He also imposes a travel ban on pirates and declares war on Henry Morgan of the Buccaneers, accusing him of spreading international piracy. Khan of Yakusha decides that there weren't enough pointless wars in the world and DOWs the Bucks too. The Yakushan court is frighteningly empty, with Boer peacekeepers outnumbering the Yakushan army by 20-1. Because the region apparently wasn't crowded enough, Henry Morgan plops the city of Port-au-Prince on the Central American coast. I wonder if this war is actually going to go anywhere. I predict that the Bucks will lose Petit Gave to the White Walkers, but neither side is committing a truly massive force. Every time one of these utterly pointless and irrelevant declarations of war occur, I find myself with less to say each time. Darius, you are not making my job any easier. Armenia seems to have a fair number of its unique units in action. The Mamikonian. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Mamikonian. For anyone interested, his ability is mounted units within 2 tiles of the Mamikonian general gain the Nakharar promotion, granting them a 33% bonus when attacking cities and allowing them to earn additional gold from plundering cities following a different religion than the first religion founded. This unit also replaces the Great Prophet, though it cannot found its own religion. A pretty useful unit, or it would be if Armenia had any mounted units, or was fighting in any wars. Korea declares war on the Buccaneers too. And whatever happened to the Korean plot to conquer Mongolia? Ishtar, dammit, M, please try to make your reports more accurate. Also, the Boer swarm seems to have spilled over into the Sea of Japan and surrounding coast. If another Civ declares a pointless war against Henry this turn, I am literally going to scream. Here we see the former Maori Pacific holdings now under the Australian banner. Can we just take a moment to really admire how powerful the Australian Empire is? These units may be spread out, but there sure are a lot of them, and it looks like the Wabagang Armada is finally being upgraded. Oh shit. Normally I'd be excited to see the Boers declare war. Well, at least they're doing something, right? Saying that, considering virtually half the planet is covered in Boer troops, this might be more relevant than you'd expect, but I'd still prefer them to declare war against one of the stagnant African powers that border them. These DOWs against the Buccaneers are getting exponentially more relevant, though Australia hasn't finished rebuilding the new and improved Wabagang yet. This is all because Mali declared war against Henry Morgan. Who knew such a tiny rump state could trigger what is fast becoming a world war? The war against piracy. Tongsan Gampo of Tibet decides he wants to join in on the action and declares war against the Bucks. Such a war could not have less relevance, but it's nice to see the world gradually uniting against the threat posed by Henry Morgan. Seems like a diplomatic middle finger isn't strong enough. 4 rump states and stagnant civs join the war against piracy in a bid to avenge the Maori. Now for something completely different. The Chilean fleet scrambles to push back Brazil, recapturing Buenos Aires, La Plata, and Tiwanaku. Long gone are the days where South America was the boring continent. This war will likely determine whether Brazil will establish itself as an advanced world power or just another stagnant state. While this war has entered something of a stalemate, I think Chile has the upper hand due to its decent navy and many artillery units. Quadra kill! Damn, I'm not good at this whole predicting thing. I'm sure we'll see a few more city flips, but Chile is suddenly in a much more dire position. Hey, Sejong-un of Korea seems to be targeting another civ for a naval attack. I wonder who it could be. Gonzales has flipped back over to the Bucks once more. In an attempt to promote unity and peace following the war against piracy, the UN decides to meet in a few years to discuss the construction of an international space station, which will no doubt only aid in the Inuits' bid for scientific supremacy. There will also be a meeting among the world's most senior religious leaders, including the Ayubid party prophet, to discuss the sinful nature of lemons. Ignoring the truly monstrous navy in the Arctic Sea, the Inuit core is surprisingly sparse. The Inuit have made very good use out of their snowy territory, building powerful communications array and industrial complex improvements. Persia stumbles drunkenly into the modern era, likely after consuming a cocktail containing Buccaneer rum, Soviet vodka, and a few drops of God sake, an old drink once fashionable with the emperors of Japan. Finland continues to be Finland, capturing the former Sri Lankan city of Batticaloa out of nowhere. One of the most anticlimactic wars in history comes to an end as Henry Morgan makes peace with Ekanik of the Inuit. Considering the reputation and power of these two civs, I expected them to deal some real damage to each other, but all they did was whittle down each other's armies a bit. Well, I guess that's what happens when two opposing forces of equal magnitude interact. Sorry for the bad physics joke. The siege of Gisante finally comes to an end as Kekkonen of Finland forces Akbar of the Mughals into exile aboard a submarine, forever dooming him to travel along the depths of the ocean as a lost soul. I'd give the Mughals a eulogy, but they did literally nothing the entire game. They just sat there for thousands of years before being overthrown by a power from across the world with which they hadn't interacted with before. Probably didn't even realize they were in Battle Royale. Mind you, it's worth noting, neither do we. Also note the Inuit Unak in the bottom left. How in the world did he get there? We see first blood in the war against piracy as a lone buccaneer landship, because what other land unit would a pirate use, besieges Ujmal of Australia. The Trungs of Vietnam begin scheming behind Lester B. Pearson's back. Back to the decisive war, we see that nothing has changed. Ethiopia appears to have done nothing but act as target practice for Carthaginian cannons. Persia has unsurprisingly succumbed to peer pressure and adopted autocracy, while an Indonesian scout tries to work out how to navigate past the Spartan fleet and escape into the Atlantic Ocean. Here we see the stagnant power of Sparta. Despite some decent early gains, poor city placement has led them to mass starvation in the Spartan core. Leonidas thought it might breed tougher troops. The Australians are pushed off Central America by little more than a land ship and a helicopter gunship. Damn, these pirates really like their ships. I can imagine those Australian diggers yelling, "We need some muscle over here." The far north, a lone Malian caravel is bullied by pirates. This is what the war against piracy is all about. It's about stopping these kinds of terrible crimes from taking place. For too long, the nations of the world have lived in fear of Henry Morgan. It is time to act. The once great cities of La Plata and Buenos Aires are now burnt-out husks as they flip back over to Chile. While Brazil still has a significant military presence in the area, I'm not sure whether Brazil will be able to maintain this war for much longer. The Mexicans, disgruntled that their diplomatic middle finger on the denounce button is nowhere near edgy enough, decide to take it one step further by invading Afghanistan. Well, not with any land troops, of course, most likely a recreation of the Hogwarts barrage of letters scene from the first Harry Potter's movie, with envelopes filled with pictures of a dead snake in the clutches of an eagle, with an arrow pointing to it saying, Mirwais. Very interesting original content. Note to self, don't trust the Trungs. Also, it looks like they were plotting against Benito Juarez of Mexico, so I guess that war was preemptive? Damn, Ekanik, where'd you find these? The Inuit suddenly get even scarier. Benito must be shaking in his boots. Having already mastered ice, the Ekanik must be attempting to master nuclear hellfire too. The boar sticks are by far the pointiest. Come down to Paul Kruger's pointy stick outlet, by far the best in the Tri-City area. Kumsha Khan, the Trung, and Henry Parks all have roughly similar-sized armies, followed by Kekkonen and Ekunik. I'm surprised that the Buccaneers aren't near the top. Maybe the war against the piracy is working. Ah, there's Morgan. While still having an army greater than a majority of civs, if any of the top civs committed to a major invasion of the Caribbean, we would see the beginning of the end for the Pirate Republic. And on the bottom, we'd have who you might expect, the list of dead powers plus Babylon. Lastly, we finish with an unsurprising Trung plot against Crowfoot of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Here's some food for thought. Are crow feet black, or are they like crow feet? Or maybe both? Something for y'all to think about until next part. And on to the religion stats for you nerds. Catholicism is by far the strongest religion in the world, though Judaism has about the same amount of followers. Buddhism, Oriental Orthodoxy, and Akatu and Shinto will all control very roughly the same amount of cities. Islam is so far the only religion that has been eliminated. And here we see that Catholicism is the only religion spanning 2 continents, though Judaism controls much of Asia and Europe. Oriental Orthodoxy is the dominant faith of Africa by a long shot, though Akatu is spread across an impressive amount of territory. The last bastions of atheism, once the world's dominant faith, are not limited to the Pacific and Antarctica, as well as a few bastions on the mainland. Hey TPang, can we see the atheist empire added in the game ruling over Antarctica? I would seriously pay to have that made. Or maybe I should make it myself. TPang's note, only if you make the trait enlightened by my own intelligence. Gain a golden age points for working scientist specialist slots. That's my best TPang impression, although his voice is actually much nicer. Anyway, that is the audio narration for part 48. Are we up to 48 already? My name is Dawkinzz, and we'll see you next time.